You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Lance with Monster 911. It's good to be with you. I hope everybody's doing well out there, and I'm really excited for this show tonight. I know you guys have been commenting. You've been loving the show with Reverend Dave. And again, this has been a strange series of shows regarding the satanic abuse relating with the cryptid investigations, but I think it was so well worth to talk about this because I can't recall anyone talking about this at all. But, you know, if many of us are going to investigate in the woods, we need to know all the potential dangers that are out there. I know for years I've been saying, protect yourself going in the woods. You may encounter rogue dogs, hogs, things like that, more of an indigenous animals. But, the scariest one really is man. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I believe that more of a small percentage of the encounters out in the woods is going to be, actually, when you consider the number of people going out into the woods with various activities, is going to be cryptid related. It's going to be man. Man is the scariest and most dangerous being in the woods, so to speak. So with that being said, Reverend Dave and he contacted me a few years ago. I can't recall right now. Last year or the year before. We did an interview. I could not find it. So I'm so glad that he called. And so we've been on this series. We did show 1 and people requested part 2, and we did a part 3 that'll be coming to you soon. So today is part 4. And before we get started though, I want to thank you guys for all the comments. Share, like, and subscribe if you can, and leave a comment. Leave one comment, and if you can, leave one other comment on someone else's comment if you would. That just helps the Google algorithms and the show growth and everything. We've been growing, and slowly but surely, so I really sincerely appreciate you guys so much out there for listening and following along here, and just following since 2017 with Cryptid Brothers Investigations of Oklahoma. And I stayed kind of a sabbatical away from YouTube for a couple of years and decided to change the name, a new look, a new flavor, but same guy. All right. So we're going to do that. One more thing. Some of you have been talking about the shirts. You wish we had different colored shirts. We do. If you will go to the monster911.com and go to the store, it's a little bit better look now. And also we have a variety of shirts. So I'm wearing the green one right now. We started out with green and black, and that was it. But now we have, green, black. We have kind of a gray and a darker gray, like a gray stone. We have purple. We have blue. There's a variety of colors, guys, on there, and there's different 2 shades of green. I think you guys will like it a lot, and the cost of the shirts are really reasonable. I think they're right at $25, and I was checking online. Some of the shirts that are out there are like $35 and everything, and these shirts are very comfortable. I wear mine all the time. My wife can attest to that. I wear it everywhere. So anyway, Christmas is around the corner, and that's just one more way to help support the show. So I really appreciate it. If you have any problems ordering any shirts, please let me know in the comments, or you can email me, which is also in the Monster 911. There's a way that you can contact me there too under contact. Again, that's monster911.com for the shirts and for contacting me. Okay, what else? Still getting calls. I appreciate you guys calling in. Be patient with me when it gets to return your calls. I do have quite a few calls I need to return through the day. I'm working through the day, and then in the evening is when I return calls back. And if I call and I don't leave a message, it's because I couldn't, your mailbox is full, or no one picked up. But if I'm able to leave a message, I will. I just won't call and drop it. I always leave a message if I can, and I promise you that. In addition, I'm still doing research at night, writing. I think you guys will really like the first book that I'm writing. I've kind of changed directions just a little bit, just because I just felt it was very timely. So instead of writing all these chapters in the book that I'm writing, I've decided to do a book on each chapter. and that way it'll get out to you quicker. And this first one, I think, will be very, very appealing to many of you if you want to know a little bit deeper about the Men in Black. That's right. So I've done a lot of research, a lot of reading, and it'll be quite eye-opening for many of you that have had an encounter before and you've had people talk to you, or those that's never had an encounter, but unfortunately somewhere in the future you will. Of course, you never know who that's going to be, when, where, how many, and all those things. But this book will be more of a field guide for you guys. So it is very timely, it's necessary, and I think you guys will gain a lot of information and insight into who these people are. So with that being said, let's get into part 4 with Reverend Dave and what he wanted to tell me regarding Cryptid Killing 101.
Well, in this community, there's a lot of debate on the shoot, don't shoot.
There is.
You know, and there's justifications I can see for each side of it. Now, I personally don't believe that these things should be actively hunted. But also I believe that you should defend yourself and you should defend your property. So in meditating on this, kind of just because of my career path and the things I've done in my life professionally, I kind of deconstructed the process in how to protect life. And in doing so, you rapidly come to the process of how to take it, because you have to be an expert on how to mitigate the risk associated in protecting your clients, protecting your principal asset. You have to be put yourself in the mindset of the person attempting to assault or eliminate your client.
Right.
So in doing so, I said, well, why can't we just apply that logic when it comes to these cryptids, whether it be Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever? Because I think that universally, it's pretty much decided that they can be killed. There's too many reports, too many accounts of people taking their life. So I do believe that it is possible to do. The problem is not so much is it possible to do. It is just like when you're dealing with assassins, how do you do it and escape with your own life?
Well, and adding upon that is, how do you do it if someone's trying to intentionally do it? I can see accidentally or unintended, which has happened I don't know how many times, that is unreported, just like you said. But I think the other issue that at hand is that when someone states, well, I'm just going to go out, kill one, and go to Walmart, you know, I'm being very facetious here, but it's kind of serious, is that you have these corporate, I'm going to call them agents, for lack of a better word, just to give them a title, these corporate agents that go out, that when they hear of such a thing, and you have bragged about it, or through certain circles, they know about it, and now they find you're going to, that's just the beginning of some more problems.
Well, and that's if you can successfully do it.
Exactly.
And get away with the body with your own safety intact.
Exactly. There's a lot of hurdles.
Yeah, that's a lot of hurdles, and that probably is the most difficult part of the process, is actually getting away, accomplishing your goal, and escaping with either unrefutable evidence or a body or what have you. That is the difficult task. The killing of them is not as difficult as people have made it out to be, at least in my opinion.
Right. And I just wanted to touch upon just what you said. I don't recommend anyone intentionally going out and trying to hunt these things, because they are just dang smart, and it's going to be extremely hard to pull the wool over their eyes, so to speak, when you're out in their neck of the woods. It's just they're not like a deer or anything like that. These
No.
are self-aware, free-thinking, nomadic beings that are extremely smart and agile. And but anyway, I just wanted to caveat that one more time.
Well, in thinking about that, let's tackle that particular part of the equation is the act of hunting of them. In my opinion, the logistics that would have to go in to accomplishing that, just to take the life, not to escape with or escape with evidence, but the logistics behind that is pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Just to relate it to something that I can speak on with some degree of authority. When we, as a company, receive an assignment to protect a high-value asset, high-value client, we just don't, off the cuff, decide to go pick them up at the airport and take them through their daily activities. There's what we call preliminary or advanced work done for that operation even before the client sets foot in your custody. So there's a lot of preliminary tasks that we accomplish before the client even arrives. Like if I'm going to take, let's just say I'm going to take a high value asset. I have one coming in, they're staying at a local resort. Okay, for example. Before that client even gets there, weeks before, depending on the level of security needed for that person, you're going to go and visit every place on that person's itinerary. And you're going to start gathering intelligence on those locations. We have a checklist that is quite extensive, and I mean, it goes all the way down to how many electrical outlets are on the wall. I mean, it's a lot of preliminary information that goes into keeping somebody alive, especially if we know that there is an active threat against them, or there's the potential for it. I mean, there's always the potential.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure.
as you gather intelligence, you start to formulate a picture of how likely, or what is the likelihood of an attack being imminent. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that is the part that you just described that absolutely, because we've talked about this at length, my brothers and I and Wiley, is that if even an unintentional killing of one of these creatures, there's still, even with very little thought into it, it's all by accident because it was aggressive, or wrong place, wrong time, or a number of things. Still, there's a number of, I want to say, strategies or contingencies that need to follow even an accidental issue, because again, you don't want these folks following you. But I think that's what makes everything smooth. And from your part, when you have an asset, a human being, of course, it's a lot more serious. Someone's life could be at stake or is at stake. And so I think an intentional killing, there's just a lot to it. Even though we may be far out in a remote area, there's just a lot of things that could go wrong really fast.
Well, you need to, if I was going, I mean, I could put together a comprehensive plan to actively hunt and kill and had the best shot of success of removing the body, or at least documenting the kill with evidence. It could be done. I can see how it can be done.
Mm-hmm. I've thought about this hours and hours and hours and hours.
But the logistics behind it is so astronomical that the average researcher really couldn't pull it off.
I would agree.
I mean, because you're talking about having, you think you're going to go out there, you know, Joe Schmuckatelli and Ricky Bobby going out in the woods by themselves, those two people, and you're going to accomplish this. No, you're going to probably die, because the amount of just the manpower alone that, in my opinion, you would need to accomplish this is so great. For one, you have to have a number of people. I would say at least 6. And I'll get into my rationale why that is in a second. You have to have at least 6, and not only are you going to have 6 bodies, but the nature of the people that you would need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have to be proficient in what they do.
Very.
And not only they have to be proficient, but the supplies, the materials needed to make this a successful mission, it starts to become, you have to be mobile.
And that's
how are you going to, carry these materials with you into an area which you should have already laid preliminary groundwork on. You should have already done advanced work in your research area if this is what you're going to attempt to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have, positions placed. You have to have all your GPS coordinates locked in. You have to consider, safety and recovery. You have to consider communications. You have to consider, firepower, and that not just having. That's one of the common things you hear is I didn't have enough gun. Well, you have to consider that. You have to consider suppressive fire. I mean, there's a lot of things that would have to go into formulating this plan to make it successful.
Mm-hmm.
And finding, a team of 6 people that are of like mind that you can confidently put your trust in, because you're putting your life in another person's hands.
Mm-hmm.
The more these factors you start adding into the equation, the more difficult it becomes.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that we spoke about this at length a number of years ago, Wiley, myself, and I, and as we began to really contemplate, and we weren't going from it from an intentional killing standpoint. This would be total accidental, unintentional. We're in an area, there is an aggravation upon us, and we don't provoke anything. But what if that happens? Just that in an unintentional circumstance, how many things that need to fall in place afterward. And during that moment where, if things get pretty hot and heavy, we need to all be extremely aware that we're putting another life in your hands. It could come down to that situation, and you need to be thinking about this actually quite often, rehearsing this in your head, because no one needs to run. You need to stay put and be, as a group, a team. So we've spent a lot of time at this, and the more that we spent time at it, it was just piling up on the contingencies and what ifs. It was beginning to get quite large, and it's quite extensive for sure, let alone someone wanting to intentional.
Just the training of the pre-op training that would have to go into it. In training tactical teams for a lot of my career, you're not going to get any more high stress environment than I trained the disturbance control team for years, which is equivalent of like a prison SWAT team. You're not going to get a more high stress environment than going into a prison riot or an escape type scenario.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty high stress.
Oh, I can't imagine.
The problem is that you cannot replicate being shot at in the civilian world, or you cannot replicate it. So what I would do, at least on the firing range, let's just take the firearms example, is I would start introducing stressors into the training program that would simulate, at least to a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
the physiological response the body makes in high stress scenarios. For example, I would start everybody out just basic range qualification. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
nobody's shooting at you, the target turns, and you automatically, we trained with what we call the active shooter neutralization platform. So 2 in the chest, 1 in the head, the old triple tap, right?
Right.
So as that happened, we would start introducing uh, stressors to the body to cause a hindrance or distraction. So loud noises, smoke, screaming, yelling, and as they became more proficient, the more the stressors we would add, until finally you were doing live fire exercises in a simulated, controlled riot type environment, all the way down to taking them hostage. We would do these drills to where we would have a pre-ascribed team that would take the security staff hostage and treat them just like hostages would be treated in that type of scenario, to introduce that level of stress to at least to where when the situation arises, they would have felt something comparable or similar to it. The problem you have with training for these cryptids is that stress is magnified even past that level.
Absolutely.
So there's no way to really replicate it. You can only do the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
And, statistically, if you shoot, let's say you shoot 100%, you're a 100% shooter, okay? And under stress, a 100% shooter automatically drops to a 70% shooter. So you cannot afford to have a 30% accuracy drop in that type scenario, because accuracy is key. From all the reports and stuff that I've heard, and of course this is all speculation.
Right.
But the typical shooting center mass doesn't work. It's not as effective.
Not that I'm aware of at this point in time. You're right.
So you have to treat, and this goes back to what I would tell my students, you have to think of the body as a machine. There's 3 ways to shut a machine down: electrical failure, hydraulic failure, or structural failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the quickest way is electrical failure. That's the brain, right?
Brain, spinal cord, the nerves. Yeah, that's right.
This is all based, assuming that we're dealing with a biological entity. And, whether these things are partly spiritual or not, which I believe they are, there's still a biological aspect to it.
Right.
And the biological aspect to it is the immediate threat that we have to deal with, right?
That's right.
So in thinking of that and knowing that they have some degree of resistance to center mass in their chest cavities and things of that nature, that leaves 2 options. That leaves headshots, which would be electrical failure, or that leaves mechanical failure, structural failure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these are all things that you would have to train for and plan for. Now, when you got something that's moving that fast, which the speed on these things is incredible from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Have you ever tried to shoot a deer running? I mean,
I have.
You can pull it off, but it's not as easy as they're sitting there staring, a stationary target.
That's right.
So, these are all considerations that have to go into deciding to actively hunt these things. Now, I believe it can be accomplished, but once again, the assets that would need to be in place and the planning that would need to be in place is so extensive, and then the chance of success is limited at best. There's not 100%. Of course, there's not 100% chance of success with any operation, but even at best case scenario, you're not looking at a very high likelihood degree or chance of success.
I would agree. And then the other part too is, so you get target acquisition on one and you go, okay, this is the one. And then you shoot, but then you have potential retaliation.
Well, you got multiple targets that could come into play.
And you don't know where they're at necessarily. And that's a problem too. Here you have something that's supernaturally strong, supernaturally fast, has agility way beyond a human being, and actually has some smarts to it. That's a dangerous situation.
Well, I just think you'd have to have at least, like I said, the numbers having a 6-man team. This is what I was saying.
Okay.
You would have to have like a 2-man recon element that would be, basically your point men. You would have to have a secondary security element. And this is kind of the way we do operations to keep people alive. So we're just reverse engineering that process.
Okay.
You would probably have another unit in between that unit and what I would call your kill unit, which would be sitting from a covered position. They would be your shooter team that would be, taking shots hopefully at a stationary target. And that secondary team in between you and the recon team would have to be there for suppressive fire. You have to consider that. So the amount of ammunition and those type things are all going to have to be factored into this equation. And then you actually probably might need an 8-man team, because you're going to have a safety and recovery team, which is the most important. You got to have somebody that's going to be able to get you out of there.
Exactly.
You got to get off the X really quick when you start having a threat of that magnitude. We have to have, cover and evacuate plans for our clients to where we get them off the X as fast as we can and get them evacuated from the scenario.
Well, I
so
think
you have to do the same.
Right. And it's amazing hearing you. It's very complex. And I remember when Oklahoma, I think last year, they had a bill. I don't know if you heard this or not. You probably did. There was a Oklahoma congressman, I think it was a state representative, that tried to go one route and finally went through the Oklahoma Recreational Department route to get a license to hunt Bigfoot. And I initially thought this is a really, really bad idea. He was trying to do it as a spoof, a joke. And the problem is that the way he was speaking, you could tell he had never had an encounter, which I'm glad on one hand. But the other hand, he's trying to be jokeful about it, and that he got the backing of a film company, a couple of companies to raise. It was first, I think, 100,000. It went to $1 million, then it went to 2 million or something like that, or 1.2 million. And that if you ever kill one, well, then it went into if you ever bring one live in. And I'm like, well, it is a spoof if you're doing that. But unfortunately, my concern was immediately how many people are actually going to get hurt in this. So I think this license, so to speak, this certification of this license is still out there. You can buy one, but I think it's more or less, of course, a spoof. But I thought the seriousness of this could, it only takes one time to have a really bad incident. But anyway, when you were saying this, it just popped in my head, reminded me about the license that you can actually go out and purchase in Oklahoma to hunt Bigfoot.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I just, in a brief synopsis, explained the difficulties, at least in my opinion, in pulling this off successfully. Now, actively hunting them and defending your property and life, let's say, you having, aggressive behavior at your home or your property, that type scenario is a different animal altogether. That becomes more feasible and reasonable because you're eliminating the aspect of having to escape. You're eliminating the having to remove a body. You're eliminating all of those variables from the equation, and now you're starting to get to just how do I protect myself and how do I keep my home, my family, my property safe?
Hmm.
That becomes a little more manageable,
Mm-hmm.
at least in my opinion.
No, I think you're right. I've given recommendations before for people when they have ongoing visitation that ramps up or migrates up into a little bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, but annoyance. But they just don't want them around, and they've taken a glimpse to see what's going on and what it is. So that's when they'll call.
Well, let's just take what we do know, okay? And that's, we have to caveat all this on the known factors. And I say known, nobody, at least none of us, here in the normie world, has one of these things, on an autopsy table in your basement. So
Right.
we have to make some assumptions based on anecdotal evidence, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Don't say anecdotal. If you take 300 reports or encounters that you've listened to, which you've probably listened to quite a few, and you have to start picking out data that transcends each encounter, and that's going to give you a reasonable view about the biology and the physiology of these particular creatures. Are we in agreement with that?
Absolutely.
So if I was to protect my property, and this would be for if you're actively hunting them as well, you have to start weaponizing their own biology, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
It does.
I mean, there's certain things that a biological creature have to do.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do. They have to eat. They have to sleep. They have to drink water. They have to, relieve themselves. They have a desire to mate, just like any other biological creature. So, in my opinion, the best way if we're going to try to kill one of these things that's attacking or being aggressive on your property, if that is your goal, we have to weaponize their biology.
I agree.
Now, I know people are going to say, well, what do you mean weaponize their biology? Well, let's just deconstruct this a little bit. These things are masters of their environment. If you think you're going to go out in the woods and trick one of these things, you may do it by chance once, you might do it twice. But if you attempt it 99 times, let's say you're going to have a less than 1% success rate. Or I don't know what the actual percentage would be, but the chances of success are a lot less likely than the chances of success.
That's right. I would agree on that.
So what do we know about these creatures that we can quantify? There are elements that we can't, but there are elements that we can. We know, let's take Bigfoot, Dogman, for example, the two most common, all right?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what we believe.
Right.
We know that they have very good eyesight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why that is, we don't know the actual nuts and bolts of why they have such good eyesight. But we do know that they do have it. So if I was to want to be in a self-defense mode against a creature with great eyesight, I would weaponize that great eyesight. Just like we do out here in the civilian world with chemical munitions, so pepper spray. Not only does pepper spray, at least in the biological sense, with people, cause involuntary muscle reaction of closing of the eyes, but it also gets into the nasal passages, which is another sense that they seem to have great smell, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not difficult. I mean, creatures have been weaponizing biology for years. The greatest example is the common skunk. There's a reason why animals, even the great grizzly bear, gives these animals a wide berth because they do not want to be sprayed, right?
That's right.
So I would think, at least logically, that some form of bear spray or pepper spray would be an effective deterrent at nothing less than with these creatures. That's one aspect. At least I'm of that opinion. What
Yeah.
do you think of that?
No, I like that. It's where they're highly functional because the rods and cones, because the reflectivity in the back, the lens of the or not the front, but the retina. They can see at night just as well as they can see in the day. Has been mentioned many times. They can see parts of the spectrum that we can't, such as infrared. That's why the game cameras tend to be ineffective. At least one of the reasons why they're ineffective. So we have sight, we have strength, we have sense of smell, we have hearing, and so.
Okay, so let's take hearing. Okay, there's a way to weaponize that too. I mean, we've been using, in the prison system, or even when I was on the search warrant or the warrant service team during my time working narcotics, we introduced flashbangs into residences, into cell blocks and things upon our initial entry to disorient and distract, that's what they were called, distraction devices. We introduced those type things into areas to give us the element of surprise, and it has some degree of effectivity on the eardrums and things of that nature. So if you take an animal that has extreme sensitivity to sound and you start introducing these high level decibel noises, which they are civilian model flashbangs that you can buy off the internet,
Mm-hmm.
where we can start weaponizing both light and sound, those are things that might give you a edge in the personal defense category.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of an instance. The gentleman, everybody knows his name. His name is Richard. He was out of Florida. And I'm not sure if you listened to this particular episode, but basically, I can't remember. We've changed the episode numbers. But basically, Richard was out of Florida. He was helping a friend at a state park. And he said, I think I have some homeless people, just strewing garbage all over the place. So Richard went with his buddy. And as they were sitting there, they were kind of backed up off in the trees a little bit. And long story short, it was a dogman type creature that was coming. Richard took apparently, as he states, some amazing pictures of this creature while him and his buddy were looking at this creature from the edge of the timber. Well, sometime shortly after, these corporate agents drove by. There was two cars, and they were just in like sedan cars with dark tinted windows. And Richard had his dog behind a seat. It's like just a companion traveling dog, kind of farm dog. And as one of the cars drove by, his dog went into a violent vomiting, like seizure. And he's like, what the heck is going on? And the dog was just shaking, violently foaming at the mouth. And just for the first time, Richard said, never happened before. And as soon as this car drove by, he never associated it till just shortly when we were talking, like the day after, the day after that. He said as the car drove by, the dog just popped right up, like nothing had happened.
Right. Well, somebody was introducing some sort of frequency that was probably causing that physiological response in the dog.
Exactly. And so they had, he believed that they had something on board one of these cars, that they were using it actually toward this dogman creature as a deterrent whenever they wanted it to get away from someone, because there happened to be a family very close by picnicking, and they had absolutely no clue that this creature was observing them and was really kind of anxious, like it wanted to get close. And so when his dog started having these seizures, these cars pulled up, and then they drove by. And as they drove by, they basically said, follow us. And he didn't know who they were. He thought they represented someone in the park or something. And as they drove by, his dog just popped up like, what? You know? So I just thought of that, when we're talking about hearing.
Well, that's part of the weaponization of their biology.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this. I'm sure they have, but it comes to my mind that one of the best ways to weaponize biology, at least if it's on your own property and you're having aggressive type behavior, is food. I don't know why people haven't considered poison for these things.
I'm not sure. No one's really talked about it a lot. I think, and this is just my reasoning based on what I have heard several times and people talking about it in certain circles, I think it revolves around using food as a means to capture footage, frequent footage or pictures, or it's more the fascination of trying to capture and recapture footage, film, that mystique, that obsessive mystery of trying to catch something on footage, as not only for themselves personally. They want to re-see, if they've had an encounter, re-see the creature, or it's just an obsession that I've got to see this thing over and over and try to capture it. It's that mystique. So
Well,
I think instead of poisoning food, they don't, that doesn't enter their mind.
well, I'm coming in from the angle of how am I going to eliminate this threat as safely as possibly can
Yes.
myself. There are a lot of poisons, as you know, that are colorless, odorless, that could be introduced to the food, a food source that they're kind of, when it comes to that, it's kind of like what we call a fire and forget weapon. Okay. It's something that you put out. We've been doing it with invasive species for years, like rats. I mean, rat poison. They take it back to the nest, and it eliminates the problem. It seems like to me that if these things have a biological element to it, that a significant dose of certain poisons would solve your problem.
That would make sense.
And then you eliminate the having to use firearms, and you eliminate the retaliation side of things, because I'm sure they have certain degree of intelligence, but for them to process the fact that, they've probably eaten bad things in the wild all the time.
Yeah, I had a guest one time that said that he had something similar. There was some annoyance going on. He was scared because he had seen a glimpse of one, and it really bothered him. And so what he did is, I don't know where he got this. He said the only thing that we had a lot of at our campsite was hot dogs. So what he did is he had antifreeze, and he dipped all these hot dogs in antifreeze, and he just chunked them out in the woods, and you could hear when they chunked them. You could hear the steps running toward where they threw the hot dogs, but it was pitch black, but they could hear, they could hear it coming, and they kind of chunked it. Maybe, I don't know. He said as far as we could from our campsite, and then it got quiet, and then you just started hearing what, just kind of this reflex of trying to vomit. But it was such a deep guttural reflex, and they heard that all the way until it was going off in the distance. And don't know if it made them deceased. He said, I was just wanting to get them out so we could get out of there.
Well, it seems to me that it accomplishes its goal.
Exactly.
Even if it doesn't kill them, it'll at least say, with predatory behavior, it's a risk-reward thing. Okay, and all predators do this all the way from the lion, down to a fox. They analyze, what is the risk that I'm going to incur trying to get this meal. Okay, so if you introduce one of those substances to these things and it makes them at least deathly sick, they're probably not going to repeat that behavior again, because if they have some degree of intelligence, they're going to say, you know what, last time I went to this house and I started eating their stuff, this is the result that happened.
Mm.
So I think I'll just move on somewhere else. And, of course, this is all speculation, but to me, taking an objective 30,000 foot view of this, that would be an effective way to stop that type of interaction at your home.
I agree.
These are all just examples of things that could be done. I think firearm is your last option, and I've given you the rationale behind that. You're talking about, going out there. Something is better than nothing.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Something is better than nothing. It's going to cause some degree of pain or harm, no matter what level of firearm you have. But you're talking about something to take these things out. You're talking 30 caliber and above, at least.
Yeah.
In my mindset, and that's with headshots.
Yeah.
You're talking about something that has the head the size of a Hertford cow.
Right. And I think that there has been some instances where the target was such a soft target that the person using a smaller caliber firearm or handgun, actually the placement was so exact that it brought down the creature. And I'm thinking the one that people found hard to believe, which I didn't, just because of how close they were, I'm sure. But the Florida mother that killed the Bigfoot, and there was a cover-up after that and I suspect, again, just the way things transpired, I suspect that she was somewhat told to leave immediately as to not be questioned. But she pulled up to a trailer, and everybody at a trailer, a mobile home, has lights on the outside typically. And her oldest child was watching the other children, and as she pulled up from work and she had gone to the grocery store and she was coming back, I can only suspect what happened is she saw this creature around the trailer, possibly looking in at the kids, and as she pulled up, it didn't leave, and she obviously had some level of training, and she shot, I imagine, either a 38. I think what was told by me is it was a 9mm, but I'm not 100% on that. Either a Smith & Wesson, a ladies 38, or something, some type of a small caliber like that, comparing it to a rifle caliber, and she downed it. I don't know where. We didn't find those details out, but it's possible, but not probable all the time.
Right. Well, that gets into, the levels of stress. When you're high stressed, are you going to be able to make those type of shots that are required to hit those, soft tissue areas like eyes, headshots of any kind, even if you hit it in the head.
Right.
There's been documented cases. You don't know how thick their skulls are.
Right.
But an eye is soft tissue.
That's right.
The throat is soft tissue. Groin, soft tissue. All these things that are soft tissue areas, to me, would be the logical place for shot placement, especially since we have so many anecdotal accounts of, the chest cavity or chest wall being, extremely thick. That's the only rationale I can come to, is that they have some kind of biological element to them, to where they have, extremely dense muscle tissue or bone tissue, bones in their chest wall, to where these, high impact and high velocity rounds are not doing the job.
Well, and the skin turgor, the toughness of the skin, how many layers of their dermis layer do they have? When we talk about these creatures, we talk about in the physical realm, the morphology, we assume they're like us in many capacities, but we don't know how many lung lobes they have. Do they have one heart? Is it, where ours is slightly left of center a little bit? Do they
Right.
have one that's completely off in a different quadrant? Or do they have two hearts? How many lobes of lungs do they have? Are they equally placed compared to a human being? What about a liver and all those other things, the nasal cavity? We just don't know
Things
enough from our end. From our end, I know people that I'm sure do know at a, if you will, government corporate level. But as far as the civilian level, I don't think many of us know. And if they do, they're not saying anything. I haven't heard anything in the civilian. But please go ahead. You were going to say something.
well, no, I was just going to say that kind of lost my
Uh,
train of thought there for a second.
well, you were talking about the a plate or the anatomy.
Yeah, the anatomical structure of these things, we're not privy to the actual science behind it. We have to make a lot of assumptions.
That's right.
But there are some known, so we have to deal with the known quantities that we have. We know they have eyes. We know that they reproduce. So all of those areas, typically, almost other biological creatures are soft enough to where it could potentially allow a projectile to enter and at least cause a certain level of damage to where you could at least escape for your life.
Hmm.
But once again, putting the round there is, it's a whole nother animal than having the capacity to do it. Can you do it when the time is right? You know what I mean?
Right. And it's going to be one of those things, like I have been all my life in many situations, not so much in your capacity, but you practice, you train to be perfect, because when you're under stress or duress, you are only, like you said, 70, 80, 85% at best adequate or on target. And so it's kind of like they used to instruct us, in school, that you go above and beyond knowing the information, because when it comes down at a stressful situation, you're going to rely on, you're only going to know at best maybe 70%. And that's the percentage they used. So 80%. And then hopefully you'll, pass in the examinations, whatever they are. So it's quite different in this circumstance, of course, when you're dealing with your life. But that's where you can't practice and think about. I think the mental aspect, I can only imagine, to run that scenario in your head, because like you said, it's very subjective. How do you train for something that you can't train for in many ways?
The best way is to, like I said, introduce stressors to the best of your ability to replicate certain scenarios. We had a saying, being an instructor for DCJS, well, that's the acronym we use in Virginia. That's the Department of Criminal Justice Services, which governs all law enforcement agencies, whether it be jails, police department, sheriff's office, Department of Corrections, private security. They govern and produce the standard requirements for all training. Well, they had a particular saying that we used to use, is that all training needs to be the 3 R's: recent, realistic, and relevant. So the more you train and train properly, the better you are going to respond. Your body will respond in the way it's trained. That's why they use repetitive things, and especially in like the military and basic training. I know in the Marine Corps, from day one, they started having us do these little mundane tasks that became muscle memory, major muscle memory. And later in training, we understood why they did these things. Like, for example, walking in the chow hall, they used to have us carry our drink cups, with one hand on the bottom and one hand on the top to cover the top of it. And we found out later that when we went into what was called, we went to range week, basically, when we started throwing live fire grenades, that's how you carried the grenade from to the range line to implement it in your training. That's how you carried it. So it became ingrained in you. So it was major muscle memory when crunch time happened. You didn't even have to think about it. You just did it.
That's it. It's you don't have to think. It's totally muscle memory.
And shooting is one of those things, at least that type of shooting where you're so accurate. It's not only major motor skills. You're talking about some fine motor skills involved in that. There's so much involved when it comes to shot placement and putting rounds on target that you're not going to go out there cold and do it. I mean, let's just take every law enforcement agency in the country. For the most part, I can't really speak about the whole country, but here in Virginia, they qualify. Your deputy sheriffs, police officers qualify once a year. And that's pretty much, unless they do shooting on their own accord in their private time, they go to the range once a year and they shoot a 60-round PPC course for qualification. And that's the only time their weapon leaves their holster.
That's sad.
I mean, I have at the academy, when I was running the range at the academy, I have seen police officers come use our range. And when they go to disassemble their weapon to clean it, they can't even get the damn slide off because they didn't clean it from the last year when they qualified.
I can concur 100% what you're saying. I have a brother, let's just say he's in law enforcement, and he is a firearm instructor, and so he was the one that you had to qualify through. And he said exactly the same sentiment you said just now. He said the most dangerous people where he was working that had to be qualified were the people that only touched their firearm once a year that was behind a desk, or some of them are out in the field and they don't have any ongoing practice. And he said those were the most dangerous, actually, folks that'll shoot you. And so as soon as they start, how they handle the weapon, how they can disassemble it, everything is really looked at, very scrutinized, because that's the time they can accidentally shoot you and themselves. And I thought, really? He said, oh, yeah, you've got quite a few out there that, and actually some are borderline, they'll start to fail. And my brother, because a lot of them have this attitude like, I've been on the force for X amount of years, and this is going to be a piece of cake for me. And then when they go through and they forget their stances, they forget how to disassemble, reassemble, and critical safety and element points that can save their life and their partner's life or someone else's life, they start to fail. And then they realize, hey, you've only got 3 tries. And if you miss the third one, I'm sorry, you won't be employed. Right. So then they go, okay, I put down my ego. Can you please instruct me on, now what was this again? And they have to, go through the basics, go through the fundamentals, right? So
sure.
Just like you said,
they're shooting at most of them are shooting at what's called a B-27 or a Bravo 27 silhouette target. And all they got to do is put a certain percentage of rounds inside of that silhouette. That is not a difficult thing to do. I mean, I used to do demonstrations to where we qualified at the 3, 7, 15, and 25 yard line. So you had 4 yard lines. And I would do a demonstration to where from the 3 and the 7, completely put, welding goggles on to simulate diminished light and shoot all 10s, just from body positioning. But, these people, like you say, who've been behind a desk or, they've been riding a desk or they're in the tech side of the department, where they don't get out and actively train. They don't have what they call CEs or continuing education modules that they do on a monthly basis. It's like anything. You don't lose it, you lose it.
Exactly right. It's so important when it comes to rehearsal, practice, perfect practice. And I think a lot, I spend hours thinking about scenarios. But if I'm out with my brothers and team, we've done this before. We've done things together many times, but still, it takes a lot of mental rehearsal as well. But the physical, the kinesthetic rehearsal, the touch, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it really matters. and this overall aspect of what you're saying, trying to have a successful plan in place.
Well, I do that a lot, Lance. I use when I teach my students, I use what I call the 7 Ds when it comes to urban combatives or personal protection. The first one would be deterrence. You want to deter threats from happening. Then you would want to, after you have done all you can do to deter a threat, and that goes all the way down to what you wear. I mean, if you walking around with a shirt on or a sweatshirt on that says, gun-free zone or whatever, and somebody next to you's got a grunt style shirt on, I can probably quantify that the second person is at least moderately proficient with a firearm and probably has a high likelihood that they are armed. These are just statistics. It's not even profiling. It's just using logic to your benefit. So if I can deter a threat from happening, that's what I want to do. After you deter, you want to be able to distract. Then you want to, go through the rest of the process. Deter, distract, detect. You want to be able to decide. Hey, and that's the fourth one. Decide to act. These type things you can do. It's a logical process that you can work through in your mind to better prepare you for these scenarios that might come up. And this just doesn't go for cryptids. Hell, this is the good advice just for walking around town, because the world is getting to be a crazy place.
Right.
You have a high probability of running into an active shooter scenario going to the gas station, for God's sake.
Oh, yeah. Anymore. And it doesn't matter if it's in a relatively nice suburb or where it's at.
No. I mean, it's happening, popping up everywhere. So, having just a basic understanding of preparation, I believe I shared it with you before, the find it, fight it, fix it. When I go out in my EDC, what we call everyday carry, there's certain items that I do not leave the house without. I don't leave the house without my firearm. Don't leave the house without my flashlight. I don't leave a house without an edge weapon of some kind. I don't leave the house without a medical kit, at least a pocket version with like quick clot pressure bandage and stuff like that. Because you never know. A Leatherman tool. I know it sounds like a lot of crap to carry, but these are all things that may come in handy when certain scenarios arise.
Right. It's better to have rather than have not when you need it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
For sure. Yeah. So what were the 7 Ds that you?
Oh, I didn't. So you have deter, detect, distract, decide, and then the next one is deploy. Deploy meaning get your weapon into the fight. Having a weapon is one thing. Getting it into what we call service condition, or getting it into action or into service, is critical. When seconds count, cops are minutes away. A gun in the hand is better than a cop on the phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Then when you deploy, you have to, and this is probably the hardest thing that I've had to get across to my students, is the destroy D. You have to be able to morally, ethically decide that it's going to be me or them. And that's a hard decision for some people to rationalize.
It is.
If you have to pull the trigger, we're not shooting we're not shooting in the leg on purpose. You know what I mean? I'm shooting to eliminate this threat, and my attack does not stop until the threat stops. This goes on what we call the use of force continuum. You respond with an appropriate level of force until such time as the threat is neutralized. And my attack does not stop until the threat stops. And some people have a hard time, wrapping their head around that. Uh, and then, of course, the last D is disengage. And then, when you disengage, especially, let's just take it if you're out here in a self-defense scenario and you've had to deploy a firearm against, a threat in public, I'm going to start personally, I'm going to start rendering first aid, or to the best of my training and ability, to the person that I've just shot. For one, it's the right thing to do. The threat is over.
Right.
And secondly, when I go to court, which you will be going to court, I can articulate to the judge and the jury that, hey, I tried to save the man's life once the threat was over with. And these are all things that you have to, consider doing.
Right. And I think that these are things that a lot of people don't, discuss. And I remember the first class when my wife and I, when you needed a concealed carry, we went to the class, and one of the first things the instructor said, he said, how many of you with a raise of hands could right now shoot a human being if there was a threat of your life? And there was only, this was a class of maybe, people don't want to talk about this stuff, and I understand, but still we had to get real. That's what the whole purpose of the class was. And I think there was about 30 people in there, and there was only just a handful of people that raised their hand. And he said, to the rest of you, why are you here? Because he said, we just have to get blunt about why you're here. If you cannot do it, I hold nothing against you. You need to get a refund today, which we can do right now before we start the class. But he just gave the down and dirty what this class is going to be about. You're going to have to decide right now why you're here. And if you don't want to be here, then fine, you can get your money back. But that's what it is. You have to make these decisions. And
there's going to be consequences to the decisions you make. And
yeah.
This goes for if it's a cryptid that you're defending yourself against, or a person. There's going to be some degree of government involvement in both of those situations in the aftermath.
And I think even obviously, I agree totally. First, I do agree. And I think the moral, I remember a gentleman, this was years ago, back before we had a show. It was on the Coast to Coast with Art Bell. And there was a gentleman that called in. He went by the nickname of Bugs. And he and some of his buddies were nighttime hunting. I think they were shooting hogs. And I think, if I'm correct, I think they were somewhere in the Texas Panhandle area, Oklahoma area. And they were on properties they had access to. It was their property. And that terrain it's kind of rolling hills with kind of a lot of sage. But anyway, long story short, they killed 2 Bigfoot, a male and a female. And they buried them. This was early in the morning. They buried him on some property that one of the gentlemen had. And it was an area that he typically didn't go to. So he buried them, and they all got to review exactly the characteristics, the morphology. There was 6 fingers, 6 toes on each hand and foot. He described very much in detail hair color, body length, everything. He went into a very descriptive detail of both the female and the male. And that was probably, I don't know how many years he said ago that this happened. And Art Bell was saying, why are you telling me this now? He says, because I am becoming an old man, and I felt bad all these years that they were so close to a human that I feel like I murdered someone, but yet there was an animalistic kind of, this is his words, not mine, more of an animalistic side to them, that I knew they weren't human, but they had human-like features and characteristics that I've always felt bad over the years because of how they were shot. And I just have to tell someone and give you a map. And Art Bell was saying, well, what am I going to do with the map? I'm not going to go out there. And he goes, I don't know. I'm just giving it to you. You do what you want. And here it is. And this was like, I don't know how many years, 30 years, 25 years later, he talked to Art Bell about this. And
Right.
I think that's another standpoint that is, these, when you're talking Sasquatch or Bigfoot, they're so human-like. My brother, just speaking of that, my brother Lane, he had a 357 Magnum pointing at one as he was trying to rationale. This was before he knew Bigfoot exists. He was trying to rationalize with, reason, like, hey, buddy, he thought it was a guy in a suit. And he was trying to reason with it, okay, haha, you're scaring us. You need to stop it. But there was no vocalizations, no nothing. You just kept swaying back and forth. And then it started to advance. And then that's when they got out of there. But my brother was still hanging out the passenger window with a gun pointing toward the back. And I said, well, what made you not shoot? Or what was the reason? He goes, Lance, it just looked too human. I knew it wasn't. Nothing can be that big. No human that big can run that fast in a suit. I knew it wasn't human, but it just looked so human. I couldn't. I felt there was just something that I couldn't pull the trigger.
Right. Well, and you have to determine within yourself on whether or not you can do it. That's a big hurdle to overcome.
It is.
Personally, I don't want to have to take anybody's life. I really don't. It's never been, it's not something that I would like to do. I've only had to actually pull or deploy my weapon in 25 years on 2 occasions. And neither time did I have to put rounds on target. We were able to, over the years, formulate plans, and especially doing warrant service and fugitive recovery, to where that wasn't necessary. We used the element of surprise and things of that nature, and I just didn't have to get into those encounters. But when you do have to pull it or deploy it, all those thoughts start racing through your mind. How am I going to live with this?
Right.
And that's why I tell my students, especially in the initial trainings, like doing a basic concealed weapons class, once it's over and you call 911, ask for 2 ambulances, one for the person and one for you. That way you can receive the treatment that you need as well. Plus, it's a lot harder to, or less likely that you're going to be arrested if you're in the back of an ambulance. So those are things that I stress to my students.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to think about for sure. It's not as cut and dry. Many people just off the cuff say, well, I'm going to prove to the world I'm going to get $1 million and I'm going to prove and I'm going to take it to the news station and this is what they're going to do. It doesn't happen that way.
No, it doesn't. And they will censor you. We've talked about this before. Censor and silence. They do this. They do a censorship and silencing on everyday occurrences.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I was on, worked with the gang unit for years, and no community wants to admit that they have a gang problem, or what we called them STGs, or security threat groups. And the media was on board with the local departments on keeping this information as quiet and a lid on it as possible. And that's just something as simple as gang activity in your community. What do you think they're going to do if you show up with a Sasquatch on the bed of your truck?
Yeah,
they're going to silence you.
Oh yeah, all hell will break loose. You're going to have a lot of excitement in a short time, But then there's going to be people squelch it real fast coming in. And then you're going to spend who knows how long trying to explain why you did what you did. And then it's just going to have a lot of problems.
Well,
And
the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
The juice ain't worth the squeeze. I mean, and those of us in this community, and I say us in the community, but people who have at least a moderate interest in this subject matter, we don't need it proved.
Right.
And if you're it's proven already. If you have hundreds of years of substantial documentation already, we have enough information right now to, by legal standards, to, if this was a court case, to convict Bigfoot of being a real thing.
Oh yeah.
There's we don't have to have it proven to us. And if you're expecting an acknowledgement from state, local, and federal authorities that these things are real, you're never going to get it.
No, and that's why anyone
until it's beneficial for them to admit it, you're never going to get it.
Yeah. I've had some people that have made contact with me, one some years ago, filing a lawsuit against the state, and I messaged this person in private just saying, I commend your courage. I commend your determination, but unfortunately, they're going to make you look like a goofball. You may have serious repercussions after this. They can tie things up in court. No one's going to acknowledge it. That's just it. So even if they did, but they won't, the best thing is just leave it. Just leave it lie. We know they're real, and even in the capacity that we are in with certain state and federal agencies not formally recognizing the existence of these creatures, that's actually not bad, because we have the freedom to go onto lands and investigate and do what we need to do and do what we want to do to keep gaining further evidence and pictures and videos and whatnot. When a agency fully says and acknowledges that something exists, that's when you have closure of lands, of property, of buildings, and you can't go here, and you need a special certification this, and you got to have special this, and that's when a lot of roadblocks start to close down, and you don't have access to things. So
that's right. It's a double-edged sword.
It is. It really is. And I saw that. And
their denial of the existence gives you more opportunity and more freedom to move. The acknowledgement, the open acknowledgement that these things exist, is going to create so much bureaucracy.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much going to be the death knell to research of any kind.
That's what I was trying to get across to them.
Yeah, you're going to be left with what their official narrative is.
Right.
Right now, we still have the ability to pursue the truth.
That's right.
But once they make this admission, which I believe eventually they will, just like they've done the UAPs,
yeah.
UFOs, once they make this admission, they're going to release a generic cookie cutter, explanation and narrative, and that's what it's going to be.
Well, and it's kind of leaning that way, and as well as I do how it's got a bent already on this bureaucratic involvement, and that is the environment. So the environment right now is a hot and heavy topic, when they global warming and gases, environmental gases, and CO2. And so why, if you had such a species that was roaming around pneumatically across the U.S. and actually globally, what better way to say there's not too many of them, which there's not, in my opinion. I believe there's thousands, but compared to global population, there's not too many. So they're automatically considered endangered. Well, we need to close all federal and all state lands And now private lands need special access, whatever, this fee and that fee. So that could be an easily um, side bent on the environment is.
Well, let's just be real about it. Let's just be 100% brutally honest. There really is no such thing as private lands.
No, not anymore.
You
No.
don't even own your own home. And if you don't believe that, just don't pay your property taxes for 3 years and tell me who owns it.
Yeah.
This is an illusion. They give us bread and circus. They give us bread and circus, right?
Yeah. No. Another thing is, well, many people have heard of eminent domain, which is scary. And then you have another thing is these what do they call them? Civil asset
forfeiture. I mean,
oh yeah, that's scary as hell.
forever.
And that's like an immediate. They can have access and close your accounts,
Yeah, RICO
your
statutes.
home, everything, business, and
I've been involved in that process on several occasions with people who've been trafficking, narcotics, the civil asset forfeiture. I mean, that's how a lot of these agencies get their funding.
well and I think that's when it first came about. It was for trafficking drugs and things like that. But unfortunately, some of these corporate offices have learned to use it with the civilians, law-abiding citizens. And so, unfortunately, the way the civil asset forfeiture works is that you are guilty and proven, then you have to prove your innocence. But in the meantime, you've lost your home. You don't have any money in the bank. It's just, you're dry. So you're trying to fight this, and it's hard. How do you fight something without having money?
Well, that's it. I mean, how do you fight City Hall when they've frozen your resources to put up the fight? It's
Right.
The system is evil and designed against you.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
I mean, for real, they have, from the time we're born, they have monetized us as people to our death. You're basically a corporation when you're born.
Mm.
They monetize you for your working years, and then, you pay into a system to where they reallocate, resources to where they deem it profitable for them. You can't explain this to the average person who has this American dream of the white picket fence and 2.5 children, and pets, and you can't explain this to them that it's an American dream for a reason. George Carlin said it best. He says it's a dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
How true. How true. Yeah, I had a patient one time that her dad bought some property down in Broken Arrow, but because it was their property, a portion of their property they lost for eminent domain because they were building a highway system, and the good of the many outweigh the good of the few. And
That's
so
right.
they lost half of their acreage. I mean, overnight. They just lost it. They said, I'm sorry. We'll give you fair market value. And
And what is that?
Yeah,
That's what they determine.
they
Fair
determined
market
fair market value. And the dad said, I paid a lot more than that. I'm sorry. He lost
That's right.
half of his acreage.
I mean, my family got caught up in this back in the Roosevelt administration. My family owned a lot of mountain land, which when Roosevelt developed the Shenandoah National Park, it was taken. I mean, just taken, no compensation, just completely taken from, generations of my family that, had owned this land forever. I mean, my father, he's the head of the County Historical Society. He still has the warrants, copies of the warrants in hand to remove these families from their land. I mean, just look at the LBL. That's another example of it.
Mm.
they're going to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
The best thing we can do is minimize our footprint, and I don't mean our carbon footprint. Minimize your uh, exposure to this corrupt system.
Yeah. No, I
Uh,
agree. I agree.
Killing one of these things is going to put a big spotlight on you that is just asking for drama and trouble that the average person we don't need. I mean, the Bible says a man's days are few and full of trouble. Why would we want to add trouble to what we're already promised?
That's exactly right, and put so well. Absolutely. The more that we thought about this, the brothers and I, we just said, this is a big deal. It's just almost impossible to. You would have to have, as you stated so well earlier, you would have to have like the Mission Impossible, where everything is thought out so infinitely that for everything to go so smooth and for no one to know, and for no one to know. Um, it's few and far between, more or less not even possible. So I think it's kind of jokeful when people talk about it, and I hear it in certain circles, well, I'm going to shoot this and I'm going to shoot that. I'm like, well, good luck with that idea. It's a bad one. And yeah, the best thing to do is keep your, as you said, your footprint to a minimum, and don't raise red flags on yourself. Don't telegraph yourself.
That's right. That's right. Keep your footprint small. It's that's the only way I can see to do it, and to navigate through life and to have a meaningful existence.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I find it, and then that way you can still do what you want to do. If you want to go out, put boots on the ground, investigate, you can do so. And you can gain your evidence, you can film, you can make films, or whatever you want to do at this point in time. So minimize your exposure for sure. I do agree with that
I
wholeheartedly.
mean, we deal with some form of an echo chamber anyway. The people who watch your program, they watch Vic Cundiff, they watch Dark Waters, they watch, Bigfoot Odyssey. They watch all these other programs.
Mm-hmm.
It's some degree of an echo chamber. But we are gaining new people into the community as people have encounters, and we have this as the population, as I agree with you, as their populations increase, and technology increases, the encounters and the documentation of these encounters start happening on a more frequent basis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think that as the technology improves, we'll be able to get more sound data, and using some of those, weaponization against some of the biological features of these cryptids. I mean, that's one way if you want to get documentation. Really think deep, which we actually started this last year in a development phase of equipment that can be used as a deterrent, not using firearms first. If we are posed with a situation that we have an aggressive creature toward us. So we're starting to think about those things along those same lines, using the benefit or the supernatural abilities they have.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We take. I mean, just read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If somebody was to read that, just apply it, to this particular scenario. You have to take people's strengths, amplify your strengths, and capitalize on their weaknesses and use their strengths against them.
Mm.
Those are all things that you have to, think long and hard about, and spend a great deal of time meditating on how this works,
Mm.
to improve your chance of success or your survivability rate. Which, for researchers, that's what you should be doing, is wondering what's my best way to make it home to my family safely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the end game. Coming back home each and every time, safe, sound, and and the other part that a lot of people don't discuss is the post effects of, if you even just having an encounter, not even shooting. I mean, so many people, we've heard so many stories about hunters going out and forgetting they even have a firearm, or they're running a mile back to the truck and they said, I sure wish I would have shot it. And yet they have their rifle slung over their shoulder. So there was
There's
no,
been people who've taken their own life because they've had encounters,
yes,
because they can't process it.
that's it.
You
They can't
know,
process an encounter that they didn't even shoot. There was no exchange of anything, only that the encounter itself caused a great deal of emotional stress to the point where it affects their whole life.
and there's an old saying that I like to use. that If a man cannot work out his anger, he will soon act out his violence. So
True.
you have to be able to work out these emotions that you're going to have, post operation. We call it debriefing,
Mm-hmm.
and unplugging. That's why you have, like, in these high stress jobs, like the medical field, fire and rescue, law enforcement, military, you have these high, suicide rates, high rates of alcoholism, substance abuse, because the job is so stressful that it's hard to turn it off and turn it on. And I would imagine that with these, if you have one of these encounters that uh, is aggressive, or just, you don't even have to be aggressive. Just having one of these encounters that affects you so much mentally, it's going to be hard to process it. So
It,
there's
it
got to be
is.
some kind of outlet. What we need is some kind of like a chaplain type service for people who've had encounters to help them work through it.
Yeah, and there was I'm glad you brought that up. I probably a few times a year I have, and just recently I've had this. Um, I have mental health therapists that have contacted me through the toll free number, and their heart is in the right place. Um, they want to help. They hear the stress or anxiety in the voice of the person relaying the encounter to me. But here's my mindset on that, is that it is, in again, I'm being very I'm assuming a couple things here, but I believe that unless a person really can speak from experience and you've not had your own encounter, it's going to be really hard to help someone else through their encounter. So you've not walked a mile in their shoes yet. And if you have any doubt about these creatures' existence, or you've not had an encounter, I personally fully believe you cannot fully help these people to the level that even someone through talk therapy can do, that's had an experience or had an encounter themselves. So I do think that you're right. There needs to, and that's kind of when I started the show. It was for helping people cope with really what they've seen, to get it off their chest. And I've learned through a lot of research here that, and it doesn't take much, I was doing it kind of already, that I don't like the one and done. I like to follow up with folks if I can. Talk with them. How are you doing? How's things been? And it doesn't have to be a show or anything. It's just, it helps to work through things and talk to someone that has experience, and that you can say they understand me, or it helps just a little bit better, a little bit more each and every month and each and every year.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Well, is there anything else? Wow, it's a,
I mean, I think we've unpacked quite a bit here.
yeah, I think we have. Is there any final words you'd like to talk about, Dave, or finishing up here with this segment?
No, I mean, I think we've covered a great deal. Give people a lot of information to process. When they go to decide what their intentions are, if they're going to be doing research. And I hope we have sold the point that it is a bad idea to actively go pursue these creatures with the intent of collecting a specimen. I hope we've sold that, and I hope we've given them some ideas on how to adequately, at least on a cursory level, defend themselves if they get into a chance encounter or they've had repetitive, behavior and activity on their property. So, yeah, I think we've covered pretty much a lot of the aspects that we need to cover.
Okay. Well, as always, I sincerely appreciate your time. It's been fantastic. We're obviously going to keep in touch. And like I mentioned, just our talkings have really kind of sparked an idea of a book that I'd like to write. And I'd like you to kind of overview it and kind of be my insight and my sounding board and have a part in that.
Well, as I told you, I'd be happy to write the forward for you if that's what you want me to do. I'll do anything you need me to do if it's in my power to do it.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Again, I think speaking for everyone out there listening, it's been an absolute learning experience, eye opener from the first show, part one, about this demonic abuse, these cults, satanic cults, and then the symbolism and the secret societies with part three, which should be coming up here quickly. And then this part four here on the cryptid killing aspect. So thanks again. I appreciate you, Reverend Dave, and just you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk here soon.
Yep, no problem, Lance. You have a great one, brother.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Did you learn something? I know I always did talking with him. Lots to think about. He kind of laid it out so succinctly, though, when it comes to people even contemplating this. And I know he said it first, there's a debate, shoot, don't shoot. And, it's not one of those things that I think by general most Bigfoot researchers want to do. It's not on the top of their head, honestly. I think people that go into this, they have an idea listening to the shows just how dangerous it could be, even though if they don't really talk about it much. But I liked how he laid it out that there is so much more involved, just the contemplation, step by step, what needs to happen, and so many things. There's just you have the contingencies of going through how you would do something, even if it's by accident and you're met aggressively. That's just another part of it. I mean, and if word gets out, now you have another part. You could lose your job, and you can have people knocking at your door. Now you're being surveilled. You're under surveillance for a number of years. I mean, it's just a bad idea to even remotely think about trying to go out and hunt these. And so I think he laid out the reasons quite well for us on why not to. So in the meantime, guys, things are moving quite along here. I'm got some people I have to get back with for some interviews. So keep the calls coming in. Be sure and comment and like, share, and subscribe. And if you can comment on one aspect of the show, as well as find someone else to make a comment on their comment, I would appreciate it. It really helps the show grow with the algorithms. And also, don't forget your t-shirts for Christmas. We've got a whole new selection of colors. Just look down below the show in the descriptions there. Go to the website and monster911.com. You can go to the store. It's in the menu bar, and you can see all the kind of colors we have. I would like to get some new designs of the Monster 911 logo, but that's not yet. But the colors of the shirts, we have plenty of them, and they're actually comfortable, and that's actually very, very reasonable compared to many other shirts that can get really, really pricey. So in the meantime, guys, if you yourself or a friend or family has an encounter, whether it be cryptid related, 2 or 4 legs, or UFO related, or anything like that, you can give a call 1-866-306-8085. In the meantime, you can find us on Instagram, Monster911, and you can find us on Facebook, Monster911 there, and Twitter, Monster_911. In the meantime, guys, take care out there. Learn all you can. This is Lance with Monster 911. See you soon.